Financial support for the production of Issues in Education is provided by the Florida State University License Plate. Your FSU license plate supports scholarships for students who enrich and contribute to our communities. Special programs, gift certificates, and rebates for first-time buyers online at fsu.edu/mytag.
Coming up today on Issues in Education, it's a new year and decisions about a new state budget will soon be made. We look at the challenges facing higher education in Florida and some possible solutions. Welcome to Issues in Education. I'm Suzanne Smith, alongside my co-host, the Florida State University President, Dr. Eric Barron. In December, U.S. News ranked FSU as #1 in the nation when it comes to keeping the quality of education high, while at the same time keeping the spending of money low. Efficiency is a good thing, but many have been concerned that the state's budget cuts, which created that need for efficiency, will actually hurt that quality in the long run. Joining us to talk about the challenges and the possible solutions for Florida's higher education budget is a man who has seen both sides of the educational budget coin. Dr. William Proctor just wrapped up 8 years as a legislator in Florida's House of Representatives, where he was chair of the Education Committee. He is also former president and current chancellor of Flagler College. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So, Dr. Proctor, you really have seen it from higher education from every conceivable direction. Just how challenging is the funding picture for higher ed?
It's a real challenge. Medicaid is probably, I would say, the #1 problem because it's uncontrollable. You can't constrain it. If the patient qualifies, the state has to fund it. And then K-12 obviously is a major consideration, and frankly, over the years it's taken a higher priority than higher ed. Then you put public safety into the picture, and more recently economic development, and there's simply not a lot of money left to fund higher education. So it's a matter of priorities, and quite frankly, Medicaid, K-12, and public safety have over the years been the top 3 priorities. So it's a problem from the simplest standpoint of those 3 items. There were a time would take up almost 90% of the budget.
How hard has it been for you as a former president of a college and as a legislature to mesh the 2 priorities? Because part of the legislature is making sure that the budget gets to all the money, gets to all the different places, but at the same time knowing that higher education needs money.
I think higher education probably needs, no question but what it needs, money. But I think from a legislative standpoint and from an educator's standpoint, there are other considerations that weigh in quite heavily. One is, I think education, institution, our system needs a clear mission. And then I think it needs a stable strategy. And that's one of the problems with the interface between higher ed and the legislature. In the years that I've been watching it, we've had emphasis on access, emphasis on quality, emphasis on baccalaureate degrees, emphasis on STEM, emphasis on jobs. And so there's never been, from my perspective, never been a clear, stable strategy for the system or for the institution. So as a legislator, I think that's what I was trying to work toward. And that's difficult because of the turnover in the legislature. And that consequence, and your leadership turns over every 2 years. So to try to get a commitment to a stable strategy, and then of course you want funding and you want it as predictable as possible. Now you can't make it as stable as you'd like it, but you at least like to have it some stability. So if you get into state reductions that we've had, and nationwide, you see them across the country. What is the alternative? Well, the alternative is tuition. I mean, that's your second major source of income. Now you're going to have endowment, you're going to have development, but basically you have state support and you have tuition. If this goes down, this of necessity must go up, or you're not going to have stability in funding.
You know, I really noticed just in 3 years as president that each year there's a different set of metrics that I'm supposed to perform to. And it is truly a moving target. And in this balance between tuition and state appropriation, one of the things that people talk about is being a very efficient university. You need to be more efficient. You need to be more effective. And I've been talking about it for a little while, but U.S. News and World Report just put us at the top of the list in efficiency and delivering quality. Now, I argue this is, we know what to do with a dollar. A lot of people are arguing that this is the sign we're about to fall off the cliff because we're running out of money and we've done the best we can, but you can't keep maintaining that quality without funds. How do you view that, U.S. News and World?
Well, it's interesting. I commend you, number one. Yeah. It's my alma mater. I'm quite proud of that, U.S. News. Years ago, Flagler College, we got designated the most efficient in our type category by U.S. News. So I do have some familiarity with that. Efficiency is always important, in bad times and good times.
Yeah.
But in bad times, you can only reach a certain level of efficiency, in my opinion, and then it kind of turns back on you, and you begin to experience an erosion. So that efficiency, you hit a peak, and once you've hit that peak, if you continue to have a resource problem, then you begin to erode. So you can only get so much of the blood out of the turnip, so to say. You can't just keep squeezing it because you begin to lose quality. So if you look at the equation, you want efficiency, but you want quality, and that equals your performance. So if you just focus on efficiency, yeah, you can be very, very efficient. You can have more and more large classrooms, you can drop more and more programs, and you can be very efficient if that means operating on less money. But it doesn't mean you're preserving quality. So I think efficiency is admirable, but you've got to watch the quality side of the equation.
Definitely.
Last year you sponsored a bill that was called the Preeminence Bill for higher education. Why was that bill so important to you? And maybe a little background on it, on why you thought it was, what it was.
Well, I think it begins from with the notion that Florida has historically depended on agriculture, tourism, real estate, and construction. That's been the core of our economy. And all of those are volatile. And they can all be volatile at the same time. And that's why we were one of the 10 states most severely affected by the recession. In fact, we were probably one of the top 5 most severely affected. So obviously, we need to diversify the economy. So the point of that bill wasn't to just raise tuition for 3, 4, 5 state universities. The purpose of that bill was to put those institutions in position to help diversify the state's economy. Now, now we're talking about more baccalaureate degrees. Well, if we doubled baccalaureate degrees tomorrow and we don't have the jobs, all we're going to have is an underemployed workforce. We haven't changed the economy. So those bills were not institutional bills. They were geared toward diversification and revitalization of the state's economy. And that's why they were important. Now, there was another component in that bill that gets overlooked. The media made it a tuition bill. It was an economic bill, number one, and number two, it was a general education bill. There was a focus on tuition, but there was also an equal focus on improving the rigor of the general education program, and that got overlooked in the media. But the Council of 100 didn't overlook it because those business people knew that in addition to STEM, we also needed rigorously educated people in the liberal arts, and that was part of that bill too.
Well, the bill was vetoed by the governor, even though it passed both houses, and yet now we've seen with the governor's blue ribbon panel, he basically said, not yet, I want to study this a little bit more, and he set up the blue ribbon panel, and the blue ribbon panel again has a preeminence section in there. Do we have good prospects that we're going to take another look at this?
Well, having gotten two of my major bills vetoed in history, I don't know that I can predict that. But I think at some point we have to make a fundamental decision, and that is, what is the role of the state university system in relation to the state's economy? I think that's a fundamental question. Then you have to arrive at a decision about that. It's not just jobs. It's jobs, it's research, it's medical, it's biomed, it's agriculture. It's the whole spectrum of our education system. And then what's the extent of our commitment to it? So, do we have a chance? Yes, I hope so. I hope that we can obviously get two institutions moving in national rankings and bring some others along. California has 6 AAU institutions. We have 1, and we're going to be a state of 19 million. Yeah. And so you either believe that research is critical to your economy or you don't believe it. But when they asked the governor, who's a Republican of Virginia, they said, why is you have an unemployment rate of 5.7 and Florida has an unemployment rate of 10. This was a couple of years ago. He said, right simply, we have the University of Virginia. Why is North Carolina able to, they're hurting too. They're having to cut their state support, but not like we are. And they don't have the tuition increases we do because they have the research triangle. We have the foundation for it, but we haven't exploited it.
Mm-hmm. Is one of the Blue Ribbon panel's items that they looked at was comparing the different states like Virginia and California. Is Florida in how it's set up that different from the others? I mean, or is it?
If I were a university president, and I'm not, if I were, I'd feel like I was in the midst of a perfect storm. Because number one, you've got state support cut. Now that's nationwide. That's not unique to us, okay? University of Michigan, I think in year 11, got 4.5% of its total budget from the state. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State get less than 7. So this is a widespread phenomenon, all right? So we've had that problem. Now the second problem is, most of these states, when they get hit like that, they have not been constrained on tuition like we have been. So we get the state support, then we get the cap on tuition, second factor, then we have a tuition rate from our major research university to our newest and smallest regional university. There's only $400 variance. No state in the union has that. So we have 3 bad factors, not 2, not high tuition. We have low tuition, low state support, and a one-size-fits-all tuition policy. Virginia ranges in its institutions from 13,000 to 6,000. We have no such range. That is probably the most illogical aspect of our funding pattern for our university system, in my opinion. So I can't find another state that does that.
I don't think there is one. I don't think there is one. And of course, it does mean that you have some universities that are advertising for students and other universities that are turning away large numbers of students. It's as if you've completely thwarted any sense that that mission and quality and ranking and that would have an impact on the actual cost or funding.
We have a tuition policy that is totally unrelated to the missions of the various institutions. And if you look at it, one of the things we found out in the OPAGA study that we did in 2011, getting ready for the session, we have immense variations among our 10 universities. I mean, we have one that does 841 doctoral programs and one that does 0. Now, that's not a criticism of the one that does 0. It's just simply to show you the spread. We have one that does $47 million in research. I'm talking about non-medical, diversified science research. And another one that does $457 million. and yet we have the same tuition.
Yeah. So in the whole discussion of tuition comes up the topic of differential tuition. Mm-hmm. So what types of things are being discussed, and what is your view of the whole topic of differential tuition?
My view is that what we have done in the past, I think everybody recognizes it. We have been producing high-cost programs, but we have been taking money, tuition money, revenue, from low-cost programs to fund the high-cost programs. Why does it make infinitely better sense to charge based on program cost? Now, I think it's University of Texas at Austin. They have a set rate for a liberal arts program. Maybe let's call it $9,000. That's about the cut. Business administration is $9,000 plus $1,000. Engineering is $9,000 plus $1,400. University of Pittsburgh has tuition rates that vary from $13,000 up to $19,000, depending on which discipline you're into. So why not charge relative to the cost of producing the major in that program?
In this idea of relating differential tuition to Florida, how much difference are you thinking would make a difference here in the state between the universities? It
depends. We get back to mission now. Do you really want STEM programs? I mean, if that's what we really want.
Because they're expensive.
They are 2, 3, 4 times what some other disciplines are. So if you want those, how do you plan on paying for them? Well, you're not going to pay for them with state support. That's pretty obvious. So you have to base it on cost. Now, it won't be total cost because the universities have endowments, they have development programs, they have gifts and grants, they have ways to cut those costs, but still you ought to price those things relative in some sense to what it costs us to produce. That's all. It's not really a mystical formula. It's a pretty straightforward, and a lot of schools are doing it.
So a number of people say, you know, the reason not to do it is students won't, they will have their decision be impacted by the differences in tuition that you charge. And so if something is a higher cost for, say, STEM, they won't go there. And they'll go get a degree in something else just to save that money. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think that probably that has some effect, but I think if that is a concern, if that's a legitimate concern, then I argued all along that we're not getting out of the Bright Futures what we intended the Bright Futures to do. I've been told by the Financial Aid Office that we had 7% of our best and brightest students going out of state before we had Bright Futures. Today we have 7% of our best and brightest going out of state. So as far as I'm concerned, Bright Futures has not done what it was intended to do, which was to retain the best and brightest in state. The percentage hadn't changed. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that there's better use of Bright Futures. Now, if we really want to promote STEM and we're worried about the cost discouraging talented youngsters, then why not scholarship those programs if that is a major state initiative?
Do it by incentives.
Do it by incentive.
In December, the university presidents in Florida pledged not to raise tuition next year if the legislature increases the system's budget by $118 million. Do you think that'll work? Do you think
I think
that'll work?
The president's probably a better judge than I am at that, but you know, I don't know how the numbers play. Last year we got cut $300 million. Now we're saying we settled for 118. And if the presidents think that's the best strategy, I'm not going to argue with it. But in the long run, it doesn't solve the long-range problem.
Well, I think the viewpoint from the presidents is, okay, you've told us the 300 was one time. Mm-hmm. So now, and you've also told us that don't do it with tuition. We have to have resources somewhere. So you're going to restore the 300 because it was one time. Now, if it's not going to be tuition, please give us an appropriation that allows us to move forward.
And I understand that.
So that's if not tuition, state appropriation. if we get no on tuition and then we also get no on state appropriation, then it's a signal that they expect higher ed to take it on the chin one more time.
Well, I had the good fortune to be able to talk with the Chancellor at Chapel Hill because I think they've been over the years a well-funded system given the resources of their state. He told me that a few years ago, if there were 100 of their faculty being recruited, they could count on retaining at least 71. That was their average. So they could stop the rage from disrupting their programs. He said in 2 short years, it fell to 40%. Now, that's erosion. If they're vulnerable, how vulnerable are we to that type of destruction of what we have in place at this time?
Thank you very much, Dr. Proctor. We've been talking with Dr. William Proctor, former state legislator and current Chancellor of Flagler College. When we come back, Dr. Barron and I will talk one-on-one about more issues in education. Welcome back to Issues in Education. I'm Suzanne Smith, talking with Dr. Eric Barron, president of the Florida State University. Dr. Barron, we've been talking about differential tuition, the Preeminence Bill. What's your take on these issues? How would you like to see it all set up?
Okay, well, you know, first of all, at the very top of the list is higher education needs to be a bigger priority for the state. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Every bit of data out there suggests that research universities drive economies and they attract businesses. If you survey every CEO out there, they will always put higher education in their top 5 in decisions for co-location. Second thing I think about is that, as Dr. Proctor said, how strange is it that it doesn't matter what you deliver, what your mission is, how much research you bring in, whether you have a doctoral program or not a doctoral program, whether you're nationally ranked and a tremendous a draw for students or not, how strange is it that they all cost the same? And you know, you really can't maintain that, and you end up with, really, if you think about it, kind of perverse outcomes, that some universities are going to advertise for students, and some are not even going to think about advertising for students at all. Some may do things like want to build a swimming pool at their dorm to attract students, and others are looking at that as kind of a strange outcome. So you really do need to differentiate tuition based on mission and based on the cost of what you're delivering. We know a STEM degree costs more. Now, in terms of charging for different majors or different steps in your educational career, 48 states now have some form of differential. 48% of all universities now have some form of differential tuition. Some charge more to juniors and seniors because they're about to be in the workforce, so they don't feel that it is big a burden. Some are sitting there saying, look at the demand for business majors. This is putting a huge stress on the budgets. We need to do more in business to satisfy that demand. Let's raise the price. And others are doing it and saying, you know, a chemistry degree costs more than a modern languages degree. And so we need to make sure that chemistry is done right, and that means you're going to have to find a way to get chemistry more money. You can do it in a variety of different ways. The state can incentivize it, the state can fund it, or you can do it through tuition, but you have to do it some way if you're going to be successful.
U.S. News recently ranked FSU as #1 in providing quality for, with the highest quality education for the least amount of money. We know that budget issues have required FSU to be efficient in forms of money, but really, how have you been able to keep the quality high and the spending low?
Well, I mean, partly this is of necessity. The budget cuts have been coming fast and furious, and they've occurred 6 years in a row. And even when you save money so that you can carry it forward and make sure that you preserve it even in tough time, you even lose that. So there's no doubt about it, it causes us to constantly be making decisions on how it is that we manage. And we've taken the attitude, and unfortunately for a lot of vice presidents in this university, that we're going to preserve the academic programs at all costs. There's a limit to that. And that's what you really worry about. You really worry that the pride in being the most efficient is also suggestive that underneath the surface there are cracks because you're operating without money, without those funds. And those cracks are underneath the surface, and they're going to start to appear, especially if you go from 6 years of cuts to a 7th year of cut, from no state appropriate raises for a very long period of time. How long do you get to keep your talent? How long do you get to maintain those programs? You can't do it forever. So it's a wonderful compliment. I try to say it in the positive. Imagine what this university can do with $1. Give us $1, we'll do great things. That U.S. News and World Report ranking is proof of that fact.
Are you glad that people are actually recognizing, or magazine was recognizing something you've been saying for a long time?
Yeah, the interesting thing about it is that the metric that they used isn't the metric that I've used when I've talked about it. I do a calculation that is much more specific about the ability of a university to deliver quality on $1. And they basically said, let's take our most highly ranked universities and see who is the least expensive. And we come up on top as a highly ranked university that of a very low expense. But I think if you actually look deeper and you were very rigorous about the calculation, you'd come up with the exact same answer.
This March will be the start of the legislative session. How can people find out what the priorities are for FSU?
Okay, so this is increasingly important to the university, that people realize what pressure we're under and that they know what's going on and they respond. So we have Advocate for Florida State.
.fsu.edu, it's a website.
.fsu.edu, the website, thank you. And this is a place where you can go, sign up, and not only do you get information about what's going on, but even the opportunity that if you want to react to it, we make it easy for you to contact your legislators.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barron. That's our time for now. Please join us again next month for more issues in education. I have a special program note to tell you about. Next month, this program will begin permanently moving to a new day. You'll now be able to watch the premiere episode of Issues in Education the first Friday of every month at 7:30 p.m. That means you can see the next new episode on Friday, February 1st on WFSU-TV. The encore presentation will still take place the following Sunday, but this time at 12:30 p.m. As always, we hope you'll join us as we discuss the latest developments in higher education happening around the state and across the country. If you have questions that you would like us to address on this program, you can email us at issues@wfsu.org. Again, that's issues@wfsu.org. If you would like to see past episodes from Issues in Education, head to the President's website at president.fsu.edu. I'm Suzanne Smith with the Florida State University President, Dr. Eric Barron, for Issues in Education. We'll see you next time.
Financial support for the production of Issues in Education is provided by the Florida State University License Plate. Your FSU license plate supports scholarships for students who enrich and contribute to our communities. Special programs, gift certificates, and rebates for first-time buyers online at fsu.edu/mytag.